I've seen the videos of stores broken into and damaged over and over and over again. But it turns out crimes like these may not only be hurting businesses in Oakland, but also the city's bottom line.
I just want you guys to imagine that you or me at the time that I was sent this particular local news segment, and I first heard that sentence being uttered right there by the local news reporter, that the crime, the theft, all the issues that we've seen in dramatic videos in places like the city of Oakland, it turns out it doesn't actually just affect the retailers. It turns out that it doesn't actually just affect the corporations, insurance companies. In reality, the crime is actually having such a devastating impact on cities like the city of Oakland that this new study shows that their budget deficit can be attributed to the increase in property crime. It can be attributed to criminals running wild. And again, you have to take this in the context of me being somebody who on this channel for about 5 years has been telling you time and time again that the modern orthodoxy about crime and how it's driven by poverty is not only wrong, but it's completely backwards. In reality, crime drives poverty, not the other way around. It is the issue at hand that is making lives worse for people in these cities, only to have all these smug, absolutely idiotic lefties say, no, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. Everyone knows, because again, we go to the church of woke or mainstream criminal justice policy, that poverty is the thing that causes all the crime. Well, guess what? This new study out of Oakland has affirmed my position. It has proved once again that everything I told you over the past 5 years about crime and its consequences has been right, has been sage, has been valuable, and I have taken on the whole criminal justice establishment based on ideas that, by the way, were mainstream at one point, but just fell out of favor due to this propaganda campaign and destroyed all of it in a single fell swoop. That's what we're going to talk about today. Residents of the city of Oakland, and of course the government of the city of Oakland, realizing that they are in fact the author of their own peril, that they voted for these soft on crime policies, and guess what? That is the reason why their city is in a massive budget deficit. It turns out it's not just property. It turns out that insurance doesn't just pay for it and it's no big deal. It turns out that crime does in fact drive poverty, and Oakland is experiencing the consequences of that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
We have some shrimp tacos and fish tacos too. Feel very terrible, and then like I said, it's very stressful to trying to run a business and having so many robberies.
Osvaldo Sanchez's restaurant in Oakland has been broken into 22 times between 2016 and 2024.
We changed the lock because he also was broken so many times that the lock didn't work anymore, so we had to change that.
Each break-in cost him thousands of dollars, fixing windows and doors. But he also loses out on customers.
People are feeling unsafe, they don't want to go out to eat because they're not feeling safe.
So this local news segment opens up at a restaurant in the city of Oakland. It looks like a taco shop. The food actually looks pretty good right there. And of course, we hear the story of this man trying to run this business that has suffered 22 break-ins since the year 2016. And of course, he's had to come out of pocket in order to fix all of these problems, fix broken windows, fix broken doors, change the locks to the tune of thousands of dollars. Weird, because I was told by many left-wingers that insurance just sprinkles magic money all over this, and that should have solved all of his problems. But I guess in the real world, in reality, that's not actually what happens, which, by the way, I told you time and time again happens to be the case. Now, in addition to the fact that he's had to come out of pocket for all of these additional costs due to crime in the city of Oakland, he's also losing customers, because guess what? 22 break-ins in this particular neighborhood does not make this restaurant look like a very appealing neighborhood for a night out on the town. It looks like it is a dangerous neighborhood, and that ends up driving customers away. And I will also point out, in addition to all of that, that this guy employs people at this restaurant. So if this restaurant were to close, like so many Oakland businesses before, then you would see people go out of business. And as we've seen time and time again in the Bay Area and a bunch of places in left-wing so-called utopias, when these these stores close, a lot of times nobody comes to replace the retail space. So what ends up happening right there? You end up with abandoned stores, tax revenue that could have gone to the city that is no longer going to the city, and of course that leads to a budget deficit. And this all can be attributed to Oakland defunding the police. This all can be attributed to woke criminal justice policies that were instituted after the death of George Floyd in the wake of the Black Lives Matter riots. And for those of you who are saying Oakland was always terrible, Oakland was always awful, need I remind you that leading up to the Black Lives Matter riots, when they increased funding for their police, when they increased recruitment, when they increased certain technologies to help them to solve crimes, crime was going down and Oakland's economy was improving.
This is a city that has averaged more than 100 homicides a year for the last 4+ decades. And today, Oakland leaders releasing the annual crime data report, which they say shows a steady 5-year decline in shootings, homicides, and robberies. There were 75 homicides occurring in Oakland last year. That is down from 85 in 2016, and that follows that downward trend. 2016 brought a 12% drop in violent crime versus the 5-year average, and a 20% drop in robberies. The police department has credited the improvement on a more prominent police presence and getting help from the community. With better technology, more residents and business owners are giving police video evidence of crime.
In fact, a lot of people who couldn't afford to live in San Francisco but made good incomes called Oakland their home, and guess what? Those people are now fleeing. Those people are now not shopping there. And again, it's not just this one anecdote. We have an entire study that shows that this is in fact the case.
A new report from the Bay Area Council Economic Institute shows that crime like Sanchez experiences is linked to Oakland's budget crisis.
Now, I think it's important to get into the numbers, and we do have the full 57-page study that we can go into, but we also have an article that gives a brief summation of what is contained in the study. So what I'm going to do is link both in the description so you could check it out for yourself, so you can understand how bad things actually are. But let us get into this article first, because it has a simpler breakdown that I can give you the key points, and then we can get into the further information. So crime and chronic underinvestment in public safety have weakened Oakland's economy, according to a recent report from the Bay Area Council Economic Institute, a San Francisco-based think tank. The 57-page study published earlier this month argues that Oakland's high crime relative to similar-sized cities, persistent police understaffing, and erosion of public trust in the government have made residents less willing to visit and patronize Oakland businesses. This decline in economic activity, the authors contend, has led to reduced tax revenue and a destabilized budget. So look, we've covered Oakland's budget deficit multiple different times on this channel, but what you guys need to understand is that the bulk of the cuts in order to balance the budget in the city of Oakland are going to be to the already understaffed police department and, of course, to Oakland's fire department, the two largest items in the city budget. Now, in 2024, despite the budget crisis, a lot of people might point to crime trending down in the city of Oakland. However, the reason for crime trending down, which is addressed in this particular study, is due to a program that we highlighted last year, if you guys will remember, and that is Governor Gavin Newsom, after taking a ton of heat for what was going on in the state of California, had deployed the California Highway Patrol to the Oakland area, and in fact was using state prosecutors in order to supplant the Alameda District Attorney Pamela Price, who refused to prosecute anyone for anything. But the problem with this particular arrangement is that it can't go on forever. You can't deploy California Highway Patrol and separate prosecutors in order to correct these problems in the city of Oakland in perpetuity, because it's infeasible for the state government to have this particular program. But when these people pull back, like we expect to see, and the Oakland police has been cut to the bone, what you're going to expect is crime to go up, even though, again, they did recall Pamela Price and replace her with a better district attorney. But the fact is, Oakland still, even with the highway patrol and the state prosecutors, had a lot of trouble addressing their property crime issues, which, by the way, is one of the key reasons why crime and, of course, the deficit are both up in the city of Oakland. Now, again, despite the California Highway Patrol dropping Oakland's crime rate in 2024 last year when they were deployed to undo the damage that was done in the city, their property crime rate was still 6,519 per 100,000 residents, which is 1.75 times the average of the other 12 cities analyzed in this report. Oakland has a nearly double property crime rate to the city of San Francisco, which is 3,864, and it has close to to a 3x crime rate in terms of property crimes of San Jose, which stands at 2,633 per 100,000. Now, the reason the 12 other similar sized cities across the country is important, and of course the regional neighbors of Oakland are also important, is because what we hear oftentimes is that these are problems related to the pandemic, these are problems related to poverty, and if only we arrested poverty, that would solve the problem. But the fact is, what we see is that these are often down to the terrible politicians that get elected in these particular areas, and when you start to oust those politicians, a la Chesa Boudin, who was ousted from the San Francisco District Attorney's Office a few years ago, you start to see the improvement. But Oakland is on a terrible trajectory, and of course, their solution to their budget woes is to cut the police, which will only drive up the property crime rate, unless, of course, you have some aggressive prosecutions from the new Alameda District Attorney, and that should continue the death spiral that we see in the city of Oakland. Now, Oakland's major revenue sources are highly tied to the presence of employers, large and small, in the city. In fact, 70% of all general purpose fund revenues are derived from property taxes, business taxes, real estate transfer taxes, and sales tax. In interviews conducted for this report with employers, safety was highlighted as a key negative of the city's business climate. Safety concerns have raised the cost of doing business in the city as private employers increase spending on security. Some employers have left altogether as employees refuse to work in what they believe are dangerous conditions, and the national press around crime is dissuading employers, visitors, and investors from coming to Oakland. And a perfect example of this are these data points. The number of paying business tax accounts in the city of Oakland has fallen 14% from 52,192 in fiscal year 2021-2022 to 45,000 in fiscal year 2023 to 2024. So just think about how insane that is. In 2021-2022, which by the way, we're into the pandemic, we're talking about post the lockdowns in a lot of cases, we have about 52,000 businesses paying business taxes in the city of Oakland. Fast forward just a couple of years and you're down 7,000 businesses, and we've heard about different ones that were closing, very notably the only In-N-Out to ever close a location and not relocate in the city of Oakland closed permanently, as well as a bunch of different various stores. And obviously this has a dramatic impact on the business tax revenue and the sales tax revenue that you would see in the city of Oakland. And the primary reason that these places are closing is due to crime, whether they're directly impacted, whether they have to spend too much money on security in order to try to deflect or diminish the impacts, or whether or not people are just afraid to go in and around these areas because guess what? A bunch of stores are closing around them, crime is up, and they don't feel safe. 14% of their businesses gone, snapped out of existence just like that due to criminality. And again, this is a post-pandemic trend. This isn't something where we're comparing 2019 to 2020 when a bunch of businesses were forcibly shut down by the state of California, which by the way is also the fault of Democratic policies implemented in this particular state and in this particular city. Now, sales tax receipts in Oakland projected for fiscal year 2024 to 2025 are roughly on par with the same fiscal year 2018 to 2019. Now, that might sound fine on the surface in the most superficial way, but the fact is we've experienced a lot of inflation throughout the Biden years, and guess what? That inflation totals up to about 22%. So in real dollars, Oakland's tax revenue from their sales tax is down by over a fifth, nearly a quarter. Now, you guys might be thinking, well, inflation happened everywhere, so you can't really expect the city of Oakland to have their tax receipts up where they need to be adjusted for inflation when similar sized cities or comparable cities haven't seen the same increase or haven't seen the increase that you're talking about. But the thing is, they absolutely have. San Jose and Fremont both have seen the proper adjustments for inflation in their sales tax revenue. It's just the city of Oakland among the 12 cities that they studied that are similar size and some of them in the similar region that has seen the drop in tax revenue. Now, this report also highlights how crime is driving down property tax revenue because Oakland's property tax structure is entirely dependent basically on the high tax downtown office areas. But guess what? Office space is dropping a lot because a lot of these businesses are closing, so vacancies are increasing and nobody's coming into play, and we saw that based on the numbers in order to fill the gap. Now, some of this can be attributed to the rise of remote work, but we've also seen kind of like a revolution pushing people back into the offices. But the fact is, the businesses are no longer there in downtown Oakland, so that's absolutely devastating them on the real estate tax revenue side as well.
Oakland can't get out of its budget crisis if it doesn't first solve its public safety crisis.
Jeff Belisario, one of the authors of the report and the executive director of the council, says data shows that Oakland's budget woes often keep police underfunded, which he says comes with dire economic consequences.
More than half of Oakland residents are actually leaving the city to do their shopping, right? So that has an impact on sales tax. When we ask people across the East Bay how they feel about Oakland, nearly 3/4 say they're avoiding Oakland's restaurants, bars, entertainment options because they don't feel safe.
So right there, they conduct surveys where they find out that a bunch of Oakland residents are going shopping at grocery stores outside of the city of Oakland. Part of the reason for this is that many of the grocery stores within Oakland have been driven out of business. They certainly don't have the same products that they used to due to the fact that a bunch of it is just being stolen. So that's a loss in sales tax revenue. People are not going to restaurants in downtown Oakland, and even people who are employed there end up looking for other jobs if they are mandated to return to the office because they just feel like Oakland is not a safe place to be. But of course, this is buttressed by the fact that Oakland's police department is comically understaffed. So Oakland employs 678 sworn officers as of April 2025. However, its operational strength, the officers that they can actually field, is 540 because you have to take into account that they have administrative and medical leave, vacation time, or whatever. So the 540 is what they can deploy at any given time. Now, Oakland faces disproportionate levels of law enforcement understaffing at 1.55 sworn officers per 1,000 people, which ranks them 21st of the 26 cities analyzed for this section of the report. Now, the cities in this report that have actually reduced their property crime over the last 20 years are Atlanta, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati, which each employ more than 2.5 sworn officers per 1,000 people. At 66 crimes per officer, OPD faces more than double the per officer caseload as the average large city in California. So just think about how insane this is. What this study ends up showing is that if you're a city in and around the size of the city of Oakland and you've reduced crime over the past 20 years, the way that you've done that is by having 2.5 or more officers per 1,000 residents. Oakland, in reality, has 1.55 officers per 1,000 residents, which, by the way, compared to California, not nationwide cities that have reduced property crime, just compared to California, gives them double the caseload per officer in order to deal with, again, while they're chronically understaffed. But in addition to that, the property crime has gotten to such a level that it's actually driving people away from the downtowns, driving businesses out of business, driving down the prices of real estate for these office buildings. So that's reducing property tax revenue right there. And all of that is combining to give a budget shortfall to the Oakland City Council. And what they're cutting that shortfall out of is, of course, the police department, which of course is going to reduce their ranks even further. So that's going to increase the property crime even further. It's going to overload the remaining officers even further, which, by the way, will drive a lot of them into early retirement, which again is going to lead to more crimes against the businesses, which is going to drive more businesses out of business, drive more people into unemployment because all these small, medium, and even large size businesses are leaving. And that is going to, of course, negatively impact the tax receipts, which means they're going to have to cut the budget again, and they're going to cut the budget from law enforcement again. And this is what we call a death spiral. This is the consequences of crime driving poverty, not the other way around. And it's really important for you guys to understand that I'm not the originator of this idea. I may be one of the most prominent people saying it on YouTube, but the fact fact is, I based it on the idea that we used to believe for the longest period of time in America that crime was caused by poverty. This was the orthodoxy before, up until James Q. Wilson came and changed the game on this particular issue by pointing out that when the Great Society welfare programs ended up coming into play and all these different handouts in order to address the root cause, which was poverty, ended up actually being implemented in this country, that's when we saw the dramatic crime increase in this nation. And we didn't see a decline in that crime until we started cutting welfare, until we started enforcing the law, until we started holding criminals accountable as if they were independent agents instead of trying to feel bad for them. So no, I'm not some super genius that figured this out. I'm just somebody who understands that a dominant orthodoxy, no matter how many times it is repeated, does not necessarily make it true. And of course, I found out that we already been through this as a country, and guess what? The consequences were devastating. They were entirely predictable, and that's why I've been on this train since 2020. That's why everything I've said has been right. Everything I told you has come to pass, and this is why you have cities like the city of Oakland in a debt spiral just now in 2025 doing local news reports and releasing studies that basically say, oh wow, Sean was right, which isn't even saying I was right. It's them relearning what we learned in the 1980s and the 1990s and deciding that, oh, I guess all that propaganda about evil white racism under every rock was not actually any kind of solution to solve the problems in these communities. So yeah, it turns out that Oakland is screwed if they continue on this path. The only thing that they can do, ironically, because remember, cutting the police budget was supposed to pay for all these social programs, is cut those social programs, maintain or increase the police budget, drive down crime in the city of Oakland, hope that businesses return, get increased tax revenue, and then you can have your social programs. But the thing is, you need social cohesion in order to have social programs. You need crime to actually be at manageable levels for you to do all this frivolous spending on these woke projects that these cities want to do. And the irony is, these people are so stupid. They're such absolute doofuses that they cut off the very thing that allows them to raise tax revenue to implement their stupid ass ideas, because their ideology is self-defeating. It's suicidal. It's absolute madness. And that's what we're seeing on full display. And now we have a new study to prove it. But guess what? Nobody is going to base any policy on this, because basing policy on facts rather than feelings, that's not something that the city of Oakland is interested in doing. That's not something the Democratic Party is interested in doing. So the residents of the city of Oakland are going to suffer the consequences from it. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts on this particular issue. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Oakland finding out that crime drives poverty, not the other way around. Till next time.